For millennia, the Republic military was the largest and most powerful fighting force in the galaxy, defending the Republic from Sith, Mandalorians, and many other threats. But 1,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, after 14,000 years of preeminence, the Republic military was dissolved altogether as part of the Ruusan Reformation, leaving the Republic without a full-sized standing armed force until the start of the Clone Wars. This major shift in Republic policy might seem strange given how important the Republic military had been in prior millennia, but in reality, it was only the end of a long period of decline. In this video, we'll be charting the steady unraveling of the Republic military from the Galactic Wars to the Ruusan Reformations.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
In the centuries following the end of the old Sith Wars and the Republic's gradual recovery from them, the Republic military reached what could arguably be considered its apex. Even with the threat of the Sith seemingly vanquished, the Republic military continued to grow and improve upon its technology. Admiral Carthanasi, spurred on by Revan's warning that he needed to keep the Republic safe, ensured that the military remained vigilant, and by the time the Sith finally did rear their heads again, the Republic military was truly a force to be reckoned with. In keeping with its doctrine of relying primarily on smaller cruisers and frigates rather than large battleships, the Republic Navy of this period was dominated by the Hammerhead-class cruiser, which had become the predominant Republic warship during the Mandalorian Wars. It was supported by a variety of newer vessels. On the smaller side, the Thrunter-class corvette, a variant of the Hammerhead design, and the Defender-class light corvette took over for the old Foray-class blockade runners. On the larger side, the Navy made use of the Valor-class cruiser, a new class of heavy cruiser that entered service as command ships and heavy hitters, the cores of new Navy fleet groups. In the Starfighter Corps, the venerable Aurek-class tactical strike fighters were supplemented by new Liberator-class starfighters and PT-7 bombers. In both cases, Republic forces were well-rounded and spread out far across Republic territory, able to defend against hostile incursions at a moment's notice. The Republic Army, meanwhile, experienced a dramatic increase in quality following the old Sith Wars. It finally went from being a motley collection of local defense forces to a singular unit, becoming fully integrated and professional. Army recruits were put through an 18-week-long basic training course followed by roughly a year of specialist training, which shaped them into skilled soldiers. For the first time, the Army also adopted a unified order of battle and rank structure. The basic Army rank of this period was Private, which designated the Army's basic rank-and-file soldiers. Above this were the ranks of Specialist, Corporal, and Sergeant, in that order, which commanded the lower order formations of the Republic Army. Above the rank of Sergeant was the rank of Ensign, followed by the ranks of Lieutenant, Captain, and Major. At the top of the hierarchy were the senior officers of the Republic Army, who had the ranks of Colonel, General, and Grand Marshal. Important officers were often designated as commanders, but this was a general honorific rather than a specific rank. The basic Republic Army unit was the Fire Team, a unit of 2 soldiers assigned to a common task. Soldiers more frequently operated as squads, however, which consisted of 6 to 10 soldiers or 3 to 5 fire teams. Above the squad level was the platoon, consisting of 50 to 100 soldiers, and the company, consisting of 150 to 250 soldiers. 750 to 1,500 soldiers made up a battalion, while 4,000 to 6,000 made up a regiment. Typically, the largest force that could be assigned to a single operation was a division, which represented 20 to 40,000 troops, but for especially large battles, multiple divisions would sometimes be grouped together to form a task group, the largest kind of unit in the Republic Army. The post-Old Sith Wars Republic Army was very well equipped and supported by robust supply lines, and since its pay and training had considerably improved since the old days, it had plenty of manpower as well. The typical Republic soldier was equipped with Duraplast armor, a blaster pistol, a blaster rifle with a built-in grenade launcher, several grenades, and 4 days of supplies, while Special Forces troopers had access to Durasteel and Cortosis armor, as well as personal shield generators and blaster cannons. The Republic army of this period continued to make regular use of battle droids to support its organic infantry, and it also enjoyed the support of new divisions of elite soldiers. Notably, this included the Republic troopers, the forebears of the later Republic clone troopers. Possibly inspired by the example of the Jedi Civil War era Sith troopers, Republic troopers were elite soldiers equipped with full bodysuits of Duraplast armor, as opposed to the lighter armor and basic jumpsuits used by ordinary soldiers, as well as much heavier weapons than those issued to standard soldiers. Republic troopers were the best of the best, well-trained and well-equipped. The best of the Republic troopers were assigned to the Republic Special Forces Division, an elite unit that was assigned to the most critical missions. Special Forces troopers were able to go toe-to-toe with Sith warriors and come out on top during the Great Galactic War, and they worked well alongside the Jedi. All told, by the 3600s BBY, the Republic military was in a very strong position, and it would have been unimaginable that it could ever be dismantled. But this was the military zenith, and in 3681 BBY, it would begin a long road to ruin. It all began with the return of the Sith. In 3681 BBY, the true Sith Empire, which had been patiently waiting for its chance to strike for over 1,000 years, launched an all-out invasion of the remotest parts of Republic space. This was the beginning of the Great Galactic War, a 28-year-long bloodbath that brought the Republic to its knees. The Republic fought hard, but in spite of the strength of its forces, it still found itself unprepared for the sheer aggression of the enemy. The Sith had spent centuries preparing for war, and now that the time had finally come, they unleashed a millennium of built-up hatred against the Republic. Over the course of a decade, the Sith seized control over half of the Outer Rim, and they began campaigns deep into Republic territory. The military suffered terrible casualties, and though the Jedi came to the Republic's aid, they began taking losses too. But eventually, the military regained its footing. Beginning with a major Republic victory in the First Battle of Bothawoy, Republic forces began to push back against Sith encroachments into the Mid-Rim and beyond. Other victories followed. The Republic drove off a Sith assault on Alderaan 14 years into the war, won a battle on Ord Radama, and with the help of a group of smugglers, they broke the Mandalorian blockade of the Hydian Way as well. But the Sith had their fair share of victories as well, and the war ground to a bloody stalemate, one that steadily wore down the Republic's military might. In the end, however, the Great Galactic War didn't end well for the Republic. In 3653 BBY, the Sith launched a surprise attack on Coruscant, devastating the Republic's capital and paralyzing both the Senate and the Jedi Order. In the wake of this disaster, the Republic signed the Treaty of Coruscant, which ended the Great Galactic War at the cost of ceding half the galaxy to the Sith. The Republic military did its best during the Great Galactic War, but it just wasn't enough. It walked away from the war having endured enormous casualties, and in the years that followed the Treaty of Coruscant, it would struggle to regain its lost strength. It would never fully be able to do so. For the next 12 years, the galaxy settled into the Cold War, which was marked by proxy wars and minor skirmishes between the Republic and the Sith. While most of the Republic military decided to cut its losses and attempt to rebuild, a number of military units mutinied and decided to continue the fight in defiance of the Treaty of Coruscant. One such group of rogue Republic army units was able to liberate Balmorra, while others kept fighting in the systems ceded to the Sith by the treaty. All the while, the Republic military prepared for the inevitable collapse of the peace, led by the War Trust, a group of 4 strategically gifted generals that played a major role in Republic tactics. The Cold War ultimately didn't last. The many branches of the peace led to a resumption of war in 3641 BBY, but this was a war the Republic military went into unprepared. Just prior to the resumption of hostilities, the Sith had assassinated every member of the War Trust, leaving the Republic without its greatest strategists. Consequently, The Republic military suffered significant losses once the war resumed, but thanks to the help of the Jedi, the Sith Empire soon had its own internal problems as well. Following the apparent death of the Sith Emperor, the Sith Empire became fraught with internal divisions, giving the Republic an advantage. But Emperor Vitiate wasn't truly dead, and behind the scenes, he'd been building up a new force with which to rule the galaxy. This was the Eternal Empire, a third great power that ruled from remote Sakul, and 6 years into the New Galactic War, it began campaigns against both the Republic and the Sith. With both sides already weak, the Eternal Empire quickly came out on top, and in 3635 BBY, the war came to an abrupt end. The Eternal Empire briefly became the de facto dominant power in the galaxy, but its reign didn't last. In 3631 BBY, coalition of Republic, Sith Imperial, and Mandalorian forces formed the Eternal Alliance, which brought down the Eternal Empire after a year of fighting. Once Zakul had been swept into the dustbin of history, the Republic and the Sith resumed fighting, and the Third Galactic War began. By this point, the Republic military had been severely weakened by years of heavy losses, including numerous senior personnel, but as the Third Galactic War went on, it steadily began to attain the upper hand. The Sith steadily began to turn against one another, and their own internal divisions provided the Republic with an opportunity, which it seized. As the years went on and wars began and ended, the Republic steadily drove back the Sith, reclaiming its former territory. By the late 3500s BBY, the true Sith Empire had ceased to exist, and though the Republic continued to fight wars with upstart Sith lords like Darth Desolus, the Sith steadily began to wane. By 3000 BBY, the Sith were all but extinct, and the Galactic Wars were over at last. Little is known about the end of the Galactic Wars and how the Republic military fared and evolved during it. The period that followed, from about 3500 BBY to 2000 BBY, was a time of rebuilding for the Republic, if a slow one that was marred by increasing institutional dysfunction in the Senate. The Republic military, like many other aspects of the Republic, recovered at a steady pace throughout this period, although it doesn't seem to have ever regained all the strength it had prior to the Great Galactic War. It didn't help that, in 3017 BBY, the brief but destructive 17th Alsacan conflict weakened it once again. Fortunately for the Republic, this would be the last of the Alsacan conflicts, but it was another factor that slowed the rebuilding of the Republic military. In the 2000s BBY, the Republic military was stretched thinner and thinner across the stars due to Republic expansion, steadily reducing its effectiveness. We don't know how it developed during this period, apart from the Navy's adoption of the 2-kilometer-long Invincible-class Dreadnought heavy cruiser as a new flagship class. However, either during this period or during the subsequent new Sith Wars, the Republic Army in particular went through some significant changes. Training and equipment standards began to decline a bit, and the Republic troopers ceased to exist, replaced by more ordinary soldiers and commando units. The inter-Sith Wars period was a time of tentative peace for the Republic, but that peace ended in 2000 BBY. Around that time, the Jedi Master Phaneus left the Jedi Order, fell to the dark side, and traveled across the Outer Rim, seeking out the remnants of the Sith. He learned the ways of the Sith from these disparate cults, united them under his banner, and then began a schism in the Jedi Order, luring many Jedi to the dark side. Phaneus took the title of Darth Ruin, and he and his followers declared themselves the new Sith. Planning to rebuild the ancient Sith Empire, they began a war with the Republic, kicking off 1,000 years of misery for the galaxy. The new Sith Wars were different from any other conflict the Republic military had ever faced. Whereas previous Sith factions had been heavily centralized and usually fell apart once their leadership was taken out or destroyed itself, the same wasn't true of the new Sith. In fact, Darth Ruin died just a few years into his war, assassinated by his own apprentices. This caused the new Sith to fracture, but the different Sith splinter groups kept fighting, and so the war continued. This pattern would repeat for the next 1,000 years. The new Sith remained a fractured coalition of squabbling cults rather than an empire, and individually, the Sith cults were outmatched by the Republic and the Jedi. But for every Sith cult the Republic crushed, another took its place, and as the war went on, the new Sith began to subject the Republic to death by 1,000 cuts. Throughout the new Sith Wars, the Republic military fought hard against these scattered Sith factions, often under the leadership of the Jedi. But due to the nature of the new Sith threat, the Republic military had a real tough time making any progress. It was simultaneously too centralized and spread too thin across Republic space to deal with the multitude of different enemy factions with different strategies and agendas that it was up against, especially given that the new Sith acted more as insurgents than as conquerors. The Sith ultimately had a pretty easy time dividing and conquering the Republic military, taking full advantage of its overextension to steadily wear down its strength. All the while, the pressures of the new Sith War, combined with the existing institutional dysfunction of the Senate, caused the Republic to steadily implode. The Senate became paralyzed and completely ineffective, leaving the military and many other bureaucracies mismanaged and underfunded. Supply lines withered and equipment and training standards began to slip across the Republic military. Technologically, the military stagnated, and eventually it even began to slide backwards due to supply line issues. Even by the end of the new Sith Wars, the Republic still relied heavily on hammerhead cruisers and Aurek fighters 3,000 years after their introduction, which was, in equal parts, a sign of how great those designs were and a sign of how dire the situation had become for the Republic. For the first 500 years of the new Sith Wars, the Republic military managed to more or less hold together despite these struggles, keeping the new Sith confined to the Rim for the most part. But that all changed in 1466 BBY when the Republic suffered one of the bloodiest defeats in its entire history, the Battle of Mizra. That massacre of a battle saw a joint Jedi-Republic force get utterly trounced by the Sith, who slaughtered or captured hundreds of Jedi and 500,000 Republic army soldiers. Following the Battle of Mizra, the Republic lost control of pretty much the entire Rim, and both the government and the military began to fall apart. In the centuries that followed, the Republic government only held together after the Senate yielded virtually all its power to the Supreme Chancellor, a position that became near exclusively held by the Jedi, while the Republic military began to experience a steady collapse. It suffered staggering casualties in campaign after campaign, losing vast amounts of ships, fighters, soldiers, and supplies with each passing decade. Standards fell until the Republic Army became little better than a poorly trained police force with heavy weapons, while the Navy and Starfighter Corps were forced to rely on outdated craft. The Jedi took over the military's leadership, and the Republic military's theater of operations steadily shrunk, leaving most of the galaxy undefended. For protection, all those sectors abandoned by the Republic military had available were the Jedi Lords, errant Jedi who settled on planets in need and became quasi-feudal sovereigns, raising armies of local forces for defense against the marauding Sith. All of this culminated in the Republic Dark Age, also known by some as the Fall of the Old Republic. This was the final century of the new Sith Wars, lasting from 1100 to 1000 BBY, and it saw the Republic all but cease to exist across most of the galaxy. The Republic military was forced to withdraw from all regions outside of the core worlds, colonies, and along some of the major hyperspace routes, and HoloNet service, as well as most trade, was discontinued beyond these regions, cutting most of the abandoned sectors off from galactic civilization. The Jedi held the Republic and its military together within what little territory it had left, but most of the galaxy only had the Jedi Lords for protection. The only things that kept the Sith from conquering the galaxy during this period were constant infighting and the shutdown of the HoloNet, which significantly hamstrung Sith expansion efforts. As a consequence, most of the galaxy fell beyond the control of either power, and these regions descended into anarchy. Both in the unaligned sectors and in Sith space, civilization as the galaxy knew it began to come apart. Many of the Sith territories developed primitive economies based entirely on slave labor, and technological standards plummeted. Throughout the Dark Age, the Republic military struggled to regain its footing, but by that point, there wasn't much it could do. The Navy, Army, and Starfighter Corps alike were in tatters, and the Jedi Council kept most of what was left with them to defend the remnants of Republic territory. Occasionally, Jedi-led Republic strike forces or smaller Jedi strike teams struck out from Republic space to crush a Sith kingdom or two, but in 100 years they gained very little ground. It would ultimately take a new force entirely to stop the rising tide of the Sith, and this force was ultimately raised by the Jedi Lords. While the Jedi Council and what remained of the Republic military held the Republic together, the Jedi Lords had been doing what they could to protect the fringe. Together with their students, armies of local allies and subjects, and a scattering of knights errant, the Jedi Lords spent the Republic Dark Age leading the fight against the Sith and their allies. Despite this, the Jedi Council and the Jedi Lords didn't get along too well. The Lords and their followers were fast and loose with Jedi doctrine, having families and running petty states out on the rim, which the Council didn't really care for, while the Lords saw the Council as dogmatic and unwilling to do what needed to be done. This rivalry never got too heated, and the two groups worked together to protect the people of the galaxy, but the rivalry did ultimately kickstart the final chapter of the new Sith Wars. It began with the rise of a Jedi Lord named Rolan, who became much better known as the Knight of Hoth, and eventually just Lord Hoth, after winning a major victory on that planet. Hoth was a grim but fearless man with a gift for tactics and warfare, and many a young Jedi admired him greatly. But the Jedi Council really didn't care for Hoth due to his Jedi Lord status and his willingness to occasionally make use of morally questionable tactics, and they especially didn't want their students romanticizing him. To combat Hoth's fame, the Council decided to create their own champion, selecting Jedi Master Skir Khan to lead a new campaign against the Sith. But this ended in complete disaster. Khan fell to the dark side, defected to the Sith, and to make matters worse, he ended up reforming the new Sith into the Brotherhood of Darkness, a unified and much stronger Sith coalition. By 1010 BBY, Khan had united all of the scattered Sith kingdoms under the banner of the Brotherhood, vowing to lead them to victory against the Republic and the Jedi. But Khan's Brotherhood of Darkness was opposed by another new force. Even as the Brotherhood united the Sith under its banner, Lord Hoth began assembling a coalition of his own. He left Coruscant with a large following of Jedi Knights and began seeking out each of the Jedi Lords, calling upon them to unite their forces against the Brotherhood. The Jedi Lords answered Hoth's call, and they pooled their private armies into a single military coalition. An army of light to cast down the Brotherhood of Darkness. Hoth's army soon took to the field against the Brotherhood, and the last of the new Sith Wars, the War of Light and Darkness, began. The Army of Light was initially a non-Republic institution, although it fought on the Republic's behalf. It answered to the Jedi Grand Council, which was made up of the most prominent Jedi Lords, with Lord Hoth as the Council's leader, the Seneschal of the Army of Light. This council commanded an eclectic coalition of forces drawn from all over the galaxy. The Army of Light was led by Jedi, from the Jedi Lords to the many knights and Padawans loyal to them, while the majority of its forces consisted of the armies the Jedi Lords had raised back in their home sectors. These were joined by personnel from the Republic military that were tired of its ineffectiveness, including entire Republic Navy fleet groups and Republic Army battalions. The bulk of the Army of Light was divided into the 7 Legions of Light, each led by one of the most powerful Jedi Lords. The Army of Light was much less a professional force than the Republic military had been, with training standards and even technological standards varying wildly across the army. Some Jedi Lords' levies were armed with blasters and vibroblades, while others carried spears, bows, swords, and clubs due to the breakdown of trade, industrial production, and technological development in their parts of space. Generally, advanced modern weaponry was made available to all when it could be, but in several theaters of the war, the state of the Army of Light's supply lines and the collapse of local civilization meant that bows, spears, and pikes became the norm, with the few available blasters reserved for elite units. Lucky soldiers would be given shields or weapons made of cortosis or beskar in preparation for close quarters combat with Sith, but these weren't always available. The ordinary, non-force sensitive soldiers of the Army of Light came from a wide variety of backgrounds. Some were highly trained, while others were essentially just conscripts that had been given a weapon and then rushed to the front. Discipline varied considerably. While the former Republic army units within the Army of Light maintained professional standards and organization, the warriors, levies, and conscripts that made up most of the army were often disorganized, acting more as an armed mob than an army at times. Although the Jedi kept the behavior of their followers in check, the Army of Light remained a thoroughly unconventional force. With that said, the Army of Light did have one big strength. Its soldiers were fiercely loyal and devoted to their cause. Some were loyal principally to their Jedi lords who had kept them and their families safe, while others were devoted to the fight to save the galaxy from the Sith, but almost all had spirit. The Army of Light's standard infantry was typically supported by robust units of swoop-bike cavalry, usually led into the fray by Jedi bikers. These speeder units acted as the Army of Light's principal air support as well, and they were quite effective, equipped with a variety of swoop models built for speed and firepower. But the most important component of the Army of Light's ground forces were the Jedi. Thousands of Jedi from all over the galaxy joined the Army of Light, becoming commanders and elite warriors. The greatest of these, of course, were the Jedi Lords, as well as the handful of non-Jedi Masters that joined the army. However, most Jedi in the Army of Light were Jedi Knights, most of whom were either trained by the Jedi Lords or recruited from Coruscant by Lord Hoth. A few Knights Errant assisted the army on a conditional basis, and many Jedi Padawans and even some initiates served in the Army of Light as well. These Jedi suffered staggering casualties on the battlefield, and to overcome this, the Army of Light took to recruiting Force sensitives from across the Rim to join their cause. The collapse of Republic authority meant that Jedi recruitment had been lacking for some time, leaving many Force sensitives undiscovered by the Jedi. The Army of Light gathered up as many of them as they could, even forcibly conscripting them in some cases to prevent the Sith from doing the same. When the war got especially bleak, the Army of Light began recruiting Force-sensitive children, fast-tracking their training and sending them to the battlefield, which was something Lord Hoth was never entirely comfortable with. These extreme recruiting tactics did succeed at keeping the Army of Light supplied with Jedi reinforcements, however, which proved vital to the war effort. The core of the Army of Light was its ground forces, but Hoth also assembled a makeshift navy and starfighter corps to support it. The Space Force was also ad hoc and fairly disorganized. Since many Jedi Lords initially didn't have space forces, Lord Hoth had to supplement their existing fleets of warships, gunboats, and starfighters with hastily converted freighters and passenger liners. Defectors from the Republic Navy and Starfighter Corps granted the Army of Light a small professional space force to build their fleets around, but most of the Army of Light's navy was still composed of small gunships and corvettes. For 10 years, the Army of Light battled the Brotherhood of Darkness all across the galaxy. The Army of Light was severely outnumbered most of the time, and it suffered from chronic supply shortages, but Jedi leadership and Lord Hoth's tactical brilliance allowed it to win quite a few early victories. Hoth pulled this off by focusing on attacking the Brotherhood's flanks, circumventing the Sith's main forces to attack their strongholds directly. This was surprisingly effective, and it played a critical role in cutting the Brotherhood down to size early in the war. The Brotherhood quickly recovered and launched a counter-offensive, but Hoth counteracted this by convincing the Senate to make the Army of Light an official component of the Republic military. The Supreme Chancellor named Hoth the Republic military's new Supreme Commander, and Hoth used his role to requisition much of the Republic Army and Republic Navy to support the Army of Light's campaigns. Following this development, the war became a bloody stalemate. Vast armies and fleets loyal to the Jedi and the Sith tore into each other across the galaxy with no end in sight. Both sides suffered massive casualty rates and were constantly running out of supplies. It seemed like the Army of Light and the Brotherhood of Darkness were going to fight until they destroyed each other, the Republic, and most of what remained of galactic civilization. Hoping to avoid this, Hoth changed his strategy once again, this time attempting the complete opposite of what he had done in the army's first campaign, to draw the Brotherhood's main forces into a direct confrontation. Hoth hoped that this would allow the Army of Light to wipe out the Sith Lords that led the Brotherhood, which Hoth hoped would cause what remained of the Sith to fall apart. To that end, the Army of Light decided to make a stand on the Sith-held planet Ruusan, an unremarkable mid-rim world that had been a minor Republic staging ground before the Sith captured it. The Republic had launched a feeble counterattack, but the Sith easily repulsed it, and Ruusan had remained in their hands. Hoping to draw the Brotherhood into a final battle, Lord Hoth led the main force of the Army of Light to Ruusan and routed the Sith present there. The Brotherhood, caught off guard by this overkill attack, took the bait, and Lord Khan personally led the core of the Sith's forces to the planet. In battle after battle, the Ruusan campaign steadily escalated. By the time of the 6th battle, almost the entirety of both armies was encamped on the planet. As Hoth had hoped, Lord Khan summoned every last Sith Lord in the galaxy to Ruusan after the 6th battle, trusting his vassal armies to handle the war's other fronts. Hoth, similarly, called in every ally he could, hoping to crush the Sith once and for all. Despite enormous casualties, supply issues, and the complete unavailability of blaster ammunition, the Army of Light ultimately prevailed on Ruusan, thanks primarily to Lord Hoth's guerrilla tactics, and Lord Farfalla coming in clutch with reinforcements at the height of the 7th battle. Following the Jedi victory in the 7th Battle of Ruusan, most of the Sith had been slain, and the Brotherhood's armies were in tatters. Lord Khan and the rest of the surviving Sith Lords ultimately killed themselves in a last act of defiance, taking Lord Hoth and 100 Jedi with them, and with their deaths, the Sith, as far as the galaxy knew, were extinct. What was left of the Brotherhood of Darkness promptly ceased to exist, and by the time the dust settled on Ruusan, the new Sith Wars were over, and, against all odds, the Republic had won. The Republic that emerged from the new Sith Wars had fallen to its lowest point yet. The galaxy was in shambles, central control was lacking, and the Jedi were all that was propping the Republic up. But with the Sith finally gone, the galaxy could breathe again, and there was an opportunity for someone to come along and pick up the pieces. That someone ended up being Tarsus Valorum. After the 7th Battle of Ruusan, what was left of the Galactic Senate elected Valorum as Supreme Chancellor, making him the first non-Jedi Chancellor in over 400 years. Valorum boldly sought not only to rebuild the Republic, but to make it better than ever before. To that end, he proposed the Ruusan Reformations, a series of sweeping reforms that overhauled many aspects of the Republic and the Jedi Order. The Reformations overhauled Senate representation and how sector boundaries were drawn, transferred vast amounts of power from the Supreme Chancellor's office back to the Senate, and completely restructured Republic bureaucracy, making the Republic a dramatically more efficient government. The Jedi Order relinquished its control over all Republic institutions, demilitarized, and abolished the Jedi Lordships. These institutional changes had an enormous impact, allowing the Republic's economy and infrastructure to rapidly recover. The sectors that the Republic had lost control of flocked back to Republic governance, and galactic civilization began to put itself back together at breakneck speed. For the first time in ages, the Republic was a functional government, and within just a few decades of the Ruusan Reformations, it had entered a new, unprecedented golden age. But while the Ruusan Reformations were a major boost for the Republic as a whole, they were a different story for the Republic military. The Army of Light was made to disband as part of the demilitarization of the Jedi Order, and the Republic military as a whole ultimately met with a similar fate. By this point in galactic history, the Republic military had all but ceased to exist anyway. The military-industrial complex that had once supported it had withered, vast numbers of its personnel were dead, and it was disorganized and in a reduced state. Valorum could have made rebuilding the Republic military a priority of his chancellorship, but instead he decided to try a new approach. As we mentioned earlier, even before the Republic military started falling apart, it had been overextended, and its centralization did it no favors in dealing with the new Sith. That sort of centralization was something Valorum was out to reduce anyway. The goal of the Rus and Reformations was to make the Republic less centralized, more democratic, and more collaborative. To that end, the Rus and Reformations completely dissolved the Republic military, replacing it with two much different institutions. The Planetary Security Forces, which were sector-based and locally controlled, and the Judicial Forces, a small, federal-level rapid response unit. The idea was fairly simple. The PSFs would be locally managed and maintained according to the wishes of their home sector's people, and they would be responsible for most local defense duties. If a crisis beyond a PSF's ability to handle cropped up, the Senate would dispatch the Judicial Forces to deal with it instead. The Judicials could requisition reinforcements from PSFs as needed, and Governor Generals could be appointed to coordinate judicial operations with local governments. When there was no active crisis, however, the Judicials maintained only a few small task forces and acted mostly as police. Most of the surviving personnel and assets of the Republic Army, Republic Navy, and Republic Starfighter Corps were primarily handed out to the Planetary Security Forces, especially to the more remote sectors that couldn't afford to build their own fleets. The remainder became the new Judicial Forces. The suppliers that had previously served the Republic Navy switched to serving the Judicials and PSFs, as did the academics and war colleges the Republic had previously maintained. Within just a few short years, the Republic military was no more. So that's our look at the decline and eventual dissolution of the Republic military, but what do you think? Would you like to see more videos about this era of Republic history, or more videos about the evolution of Republic military? Let us know all that and more in the comment section below, and as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.